Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am glad, as always, to be with you as today we continue our series, Be Well Read. Now, I realize some of you may be joining us for the first time. I hope so. That's great. But we also hope that you will make this a regular part of your New Year schedule. We do our best to connect on the second and fourth Thursday afternoons of the month at 4 p.m. This month, we're getting back onto that schedule after having to shift a little bit during the holidays. So welcome. I'm Deborah Garrard, and as a mind, body, spirit wellness consultant and whole food plant-based nutritionist, I'm founder and lead coach of the nonprofit Be Well, Serve Well. At Be Well, Serve Well, we believe each of us is here on this planet to serve you and me, to serve each other, to serve our community, our creator. And we simply can't do that if we're not well. Be well, serve well. As a nonprofit, we seek to empower and educate the well-being of several groups of leaders in our community, faith leaders, all faiths, educators, faculty, teachers, staff, and then also those raising children, parents, grandparents, and others who have this important task in our communities. Strong leaders create strong communities. So I'm also glad and grateful, as always, to partner with Story and Song Bookstore Bistro on Amelia Island in Fernandina Beach. And today, I'm actually in the bookstore, so I'm happy to be here. As I share books that have impacted my own life, personally and professionally, my wellness, my wholeness, and books that I believe will not only help you be well read, but to be well and serve well right alongside me. It's the new year, so I suspect some of you have made a New Year's resolution or two, right? I did some research on resolutions into the origin of New Year's resolutions. Over 4,000 years ago, the ancient Babylonians are said to have made the first resolutions, promising the gods that they would pay off old debts and get this, return borrowed farm equipment. Make sure you do that this year, okay? In exchange for earning favor with the gods and starting the year off on the right foot, so to speak. The Romans also began each year making promises to the god Janus. And you may know that the month of January is named for this god. It turns out that only 8% of us who make resolutions are able to keep them lasting each year. Now, I think the difference between keeping our resolutions or not comes down to the difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation often comes from outside of us, and it doesn't always resonate with our spirits. Many of us know a lot of highly motivated people who are just miserable. Inspiration, on the other hand, enlivens us from the inside as we are inspired from deep within, like a parent seeking greater health and energy to play with their young children. The effectiveness of action depends upon the source from which it springs. Let me say that again. The effectiveness of action depends upon the source from which it springs. I'm glad you felt inspired today to join us. And we're going to begin this year with a book filled with both science and stories that I believe will inspire each of us, not only to better physical health, but also to better, more full lives, living long and well as we seek to be well read. Now, many people live to eat. Maybe you're among them. I once was, but now I eat to live. I eat for life. Our book today is Eat for Life. Eat for Life. See that? It's written by Dr. Joel Fuhrman, and he describes in detail what he calls a Nutritarian approach to eating lifestyle. Dr. Fuhrman is a family physician, president of the Nutritional Research Foundation, and on the faculty of Northern Arizona University, the Health Sciences Division. He coined the term Nutritarian to describe a nutrient-dense eating lifestyle designed to prevent cancer, slow aging, and extend lifespan. Win, win, win. We'll be learning more about this approach as in our time together today. First, though, a bit of fun trivia, which Dr. Fuhrman probably doesn't consider trivial at all. Dr. Fuhrman is a former world-class figure skater who placed second in the United States National Pairs Championship in 1973 and third in the 1976 World Professional Pairs Skating Championship in Jaca, Spain. Along with his nutritional expertise, Dr. Fuhrman has been involved professionally with sports medical committees, advised professional and Olympic athletes, and has lectured to athletic trainers and world-class athletes, helping them to maximize performance and prevent injury. Dr. Fuhrman is a prolific writer with 9 books to his credit, including bestsellers Eat to Live, The End of Diabetes, The End of Dieting, Super Immunity, The End of Heart Disease, and 2 cookbooks. I'm not sure how he has time to practice medicine, but he does. And it is his passion, as it is mine, to help people heal. Dr. Fuhrman is not your typical family physician, and he's not trying to be. Practicing for over 30 years, Dr. Fuhrman will tell you what some of his colleagues might believe, he says, but few would confess. Doctors and medications cannot deliver the best health outcomes and protection against disease, pain, and suffering. The best healthcare is self-care, and I completely agree. For Fuhrman, self-care begins with changing how we eat. How? By adopting what he calls a Nutritarian diet. In his latest book, Eat for Life, Dr. Fuhrman combines his years of study and research with the best each of his previous books have offered to detail the Nutritarian eating lifestyle, to share stories of patients whose diseases have been healed and reversed, and to provide a detailed roadmap, including recipes for how to implement the Nutritarian diet into your life. Before detailing the eating lifestyle he espouses, the author details some statistics which are alarming. Almost 40% of Americans die of heart attacks and strokes. 28 million Americans suffer from the crippling pain of osteoarthritis. 35 million Americans suffer from chronic headaches. 1/3 of people older than 85 will develop dementia. 38% of Americans are diagnosed with cancer. This seems like a whole lot of gloom and doom, right? Truth-telling, I would call it. And yet he very quickly offers another truth, saying this: you don't have to be one of them. You simply do not have to be sick. And he continues, and I'd like to read to you from the book. We consider it normal to lose youthful vigor in our early 40s, carry 30 or 40 extra pounds, live with chronic illness in our late 40s and 50s, and live our last decades dependent on others. But all this should not be considered normal. These expectations are the result of a lifelong pattern of unhealthy living and misguided information. We should look forward to enjoying an active life well into our 90s, he writes. This seems like an outrageous expectation because most people spend a lifetime consuming an unhealthy diet. They don't make the connection that we are what we eat, he writes, and ill health, he continues, in the later years of our lives is the result of earlier poor choices. If you've been listening along to this series for very long at all, you've heard me quote Chris Carr. She's a cancer thriver living now, and I mean living, with an inoperable cancer for almost 18 years. February 14th, Valentine's Day, is her cancerversary, the day that she heard these words: you have an inoperable cancer. The doctors gave her 10 years, but she's still here. And she says this: the challenge arises when we let the familiar stand in the way of the possible. These things Fuhrman outlines in the introduction to his book are all too familiar, and yet his work with more than 15,000 patients has taught him what is possible. He's learned that it is possible never to have a heart attack or stroke, to avoid dementia. It's possible to reduce your risk of cancer. to prevent and heal digestive issues and autoimmune issues like lupus, arthritis, and psoriasis, and to prevent and reverse type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol, making medications completely unnecessary. How, you ask? Here's a quote. "The body is a miraculous self-healing machine when you supply it with an optimal nutritional environment. Eat for Life will help you develop that optimal nutritional environment." Early in this book, Dr. Fuhrman invites us to be one of the few, not one of the many. Like me, I suspect you were raised on the standard American diet. Sad. We've talked about this often, so by now, you know this is an eating lifestyle of meats, fried foods, dairy, and processed products like white flour and sugar. Sadly, literally, we grew up and grew to love the very things that were and still are, for many, killing us. I hope you'll be inspired by reading Eat for Life, to truly eat for life, becoming one of the few and leaving the many behind, or better yet, setting an example for those around you who seek to be well too. The best news of this book, I believe, is found early in its pages, and it's in this sentence. Dr. Fuhrman writes, "Your success depends on your willingness to learn. It's okay if you're doubtful. Just continue being curious," end quote. I encourage you to be curious about your health, curious about all the things that relate to your health. So let's take our curiosity and continue. I confess I was curious too when I first picked up Fuhrman's book, which was recommended to me by good friends Jenny and Ryan, whose lives and health had been significantly and positively impacted by reading his earlier works. My curiosity found me first in going through the entire book and reading the case histories, the stories, personal stories Fuhrman includes at the beginning and end of each chapter. The proof, after all, is in the pudding. In this case, it's chia pudding. And yes, there's a recipe for chia pudding in the book. Stories like the story of Sandra Mcclanahan. Sandra is a high school teacher who confesses right up front to being a food addict, a real food addict, she says. Each year, she would eat all of her band fundraising candy in school. And then, because she hadn't sold any of it, she had to pay for all of it herself. And she did this by teaching piano lessons on the side. Sandra is 5'2" tall and weighed in at 252 pounds as her story begins. With a family history of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, she knew she had to break her addiction to junk food or slide down the slippery slope of disease and morbid obesity. She began to research. She discovered Dr. Fuhrman and his earlier books, Eat to Live and The End of Diabetes. She immersed herself in his teachings. Within 3 years of following the nutritional guidance of these books, Sandra no longer experienced migraines, no bloating or joint stiffness. Her blood pressure became textbook normal and her cholesterol and blood sugar perfect. In addition to gaining health, she lost the weight she needed to lose. She began her healing journey as a Nutritarian in 2015, and as of the printing of Eat for Life in 2020, where she shares her story, she had lost half of her body weight, a full 126 pounds. She says that her students never believed the photos were real when she showed before photos of herself. They thought that she'd photoshopped her head onto someone else's obese body. You see, many of us know people who lose weight but don't gain health. It's one of those familiar things, all too familiar. But it is possible to gain health and in doing so, to lose unwanted weight. Stories like this one bring life to the science that Dr. Fuhrman shares throughout his book. I think it's sometimes difficult to digest science that so starkly stands in contrast to what we've come to consider familiar. These case studies put skin to the science. Real people like you and me, experiencing new possibilities of healing and hope. And you know I'm all about healing hope. These people have discovered what I hope you will discover. that, as Fuhrman points out, empty calories come with a cost. He outlines it like this. First, you pay in the present by feeling ill and being overweight and sickly. Second, you pay in the future with poor health and loss of brain function and memory as you age. And then third, you pay down the road with the years of life taken away from you. The standard American diet is quite simply lacking in nutrients, and the Nutritarian eating lifestyle focuses on putting nutrients front and center on our plates so that one bite at a time, we can regain the health we've lost, reverse disease, increase longevity, and get back to living. That's what it means to eat for life. Animal products, meat, eggs, dairy, and even fish are relatively low in vitamins and mineral. But as Dr. Fuhrman points out, they are completely lacking in both antioxidants and phytochemicals, the protective compounds that detoxify carcinogens, maximize a strong immune system, something we've all needed this past year, and prevent inflammation. There it is again, a win-win-win. The Nutritarian eating lifestyle is an eating lifestyle with nutrient-dense, plant-based foods at the center. Fuhrman addresses a couple of questions that naturally arise. I've heard these questions too when people begin to consider a shift toward more plant-based choices. One is cost. People think it costs more to eat healthy foods. And while it is true that the government tells us to increase fruits and vegetables in our eating lifestyle, all the while subsidizing the more harmful industries of dairy and cattle, making these products less expensive, I've found that when eating a nutrient-dense, plant-based diet, I fill up on less. Processed foods don't provide our bodies with the nutrients we need, and so we are often, always hungry for more. More costs more. Also, to help his readers know which foods are nutrient dense, which foods have an abundance not only of vitamins and minerals, but also of those prized antioxidants and phytochemicals, Dr. Fuhrman created the Aggregate Nutrient Density Index, ANDI, A-N-D-I. It's a great tool that I've used with clients over the years to help them learn the true value of the foods that they choose to eat. The index is based on 34 important nutritional components. Among them are fiber, iron, magnesium, folate, zinc, phosphorus, and the vitamins C, K, E, B6, B12, among others. Andy ranks food on a scale of 1 to 1,000, with the highest ranking of 1,000 going, no surprise, to cruciferous leafy greens, green vegetables like kale, mustard greens, and 'tis the season with the new year, at least in the South, collards. Now, more recently, Fuhrman has adjusted the index to reflect a really practical approach for his readers and his patients that provides a nutrient IQ score. It's based on a serving size of 1 cup. For example, our seasonal collards, 1 cup when cooked receives a nutrient IQ of 112, while the same cup of collard greens raw only rank at 79. This is a great example because in this case, cooking enhances the bioavailability of the micronutrients. This guide is invaluable to the person truly seeking to eat for life. You may remember back in September when we talked about Dr. Michael Greger's book, How Not to Die. He used a phrase and taught us that when asking if a food is healthy or not, we can ask, compared to what? And the Nutrient IQ offers a great way to make the comparison based on real scientific data. Mangoes and melons rank in at 19, while milk ranks between 3 and 5, depending upon the type, 2%, 3%, whole. Onions, raw, rank at 60. Cooked, they go down a little bit to 45, and so on. It's worth the price of the book, I think, for this guide alone, as it's a simple way to begin discovering and increasing the nutrient value of the foods we eat, morning, noon, and night. Now let's put a little more skin on the science. Another person who discovered the value of this nutritarian approach is April Bromley, when she found herself diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 48. Out of the blue, half of her tongue went numb, she lost control of her bladder and all feeling in the right side of her body. When faced with a treatment plan of daily injections for immune suppressing drugs, she was desperate to find another option. A friend recommended her to an acupuncturist, and the acupuncturist recommended a plant-based eating lifestyle and shared with April Dr. Fuhrman's book, the earlier book, Eat to Live. Returning to her doctor to share her plan, April was disappointed by his response. Still, she was determined, and she made a deal with him. She promised the doctor if this Nutritarian diet didn't yield results within 6 months, she would begin the injections he was prescribing. Sounds fair. I'll let her continue the story in her own words. My first order of business was to clear my home of bad foods, she writes. And with my husband's support, we gathered our favorite treats into a laundry basket and gave them away. I actually sobbed as I handed over the basket. But after just 6 weeks of eating a Nutritarian diet, I saw dramatic improvements. I was driving my car and I started to feel my tongue again. I could wiggle it around. I was joyous. This meant that my body was repairing itself and not ripping me apart. When I went for a follow-up MRI a few months later, I was told that my 3 brain lesions had shrunk, but the doctor shrugged it off, saying that I had just been especially inflamed at the first MRI. I was confident that Dr. Fuhrman's nutritional protocols were working, she says, so I thanked the doctor and never went back. I'll never go back to my old eating habits again either. I'm at a perfect weight and I have more energy and vitality than I ever did. I feel joy. It's easy to see, as Fuhrman points out, the Nutritarian eating lifestyle checks off every box. Enhancing joy, he calls it play span, I like that, enhancing health span and enhancing lifespan, while also proving powerfully effective in reversing diseases, including multiple sclerosis. When comparing health span and lifespan, the life expectancy for women in the United States is 81 years old. For men, it's 76. However, the healthy life expectancy is only 70 for women, 67 for men. That's an average of 10 years to live with diminished health. When Eat for Life is teaching us, it simply doesn't have to be that way. Here's another powerful example of this powerful approach to food and nutrition. One of Dr. Fuhrman's patients, John Palikowski, came to him at the age of 72. He was taking multiple medications to control his blood pressure, and his cardiologist had recommended a stent procedure due to a diagnosis of triple vessel coronary artery disease. Instead of undergoing this invasive stent procedure, John chose to begin following the Nutritarian program, reversed his heart disease, normalized his stress test, and resolved his high blood pressure and cholesterol levels. And at the writing of this book, John was alive and thriving without medications at the ripe, young age of 98, 26 years later. More truth-telling, as Fuhrman writes, quote, "We are in an era of nutritional breakthroughs that give us a unique opportunity to be super healthy, or we can eat the worst diet imaginable. It's up to you." Continuing his in-depth explanation of the Nutritarian eating lifestyle, Fuhrman is wise to bust a few myths like the low-carb craze that often distracts dieters. Not all carbs are created equal. Some promote longevity and prevent body fat accumulation, and some do not. The difference is in the presence of fiber and a component called resistant starch, which acts like fiber. Black beans, lentils, split peas, and navy beans all fall into the category of resistant starches, which encourage the growth of beneficial bacteria, reducing fat storage and lowering the glycemic effect of other foods eaten during the same meal. Throughout the book, Dr. Fuhrman offers practical guidance, not just scientific data, to support the increase of nutrient-dense foods in our daily lives. Speaking of cancer, he writes this: the foods with the strongest evidence supporting their anti-cancer and longevity-promoting effects are green vegetables, particularly cruciferous vegetables, followed by what he calls G-bombs. This is easy to remember. It's an acronym for greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds, G-bombs. These foods have documented benefits to prevent cancer. Chapter 4 has a telling title, Your Health is in Your Hands. And he begins this chapter with another story of healing, the story of Sue Kehoe, diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer at the age of 46, with a very large mass on one breast and cancer metastasized to 3 places in her liver. Doctors prescribed aggressive chemotherapy, followed by surgery and radiation. The first chemo treatment was so debilitating that Sue had to be carried into her home after the treatment. Discouraged and hopeless, Sue says she happened to turn on PBS at the exact time Dr. Fuhrman was sharing this good news. I'm going to give you the knowledge that can set you free from chronic disease. Somehow, Sue and her husband had the courage to believe him, sensing that a spiritual power had put her in front of the TV at exactly the right moment to hear this message of hope. Despite her oncologist telling her that diet wouldn't have any effect on the cancer at this stage, she and her husband, Steve, began eating a Nutritarian diet, including G-bombs. Within weeks, they both began to feel more energized. Her next chemo treatment was less difficult, and each treatment got easier as she became stronger. I'll let Sue tell you the rest of the story. That was more than 8 years ago, she says, and I have no signs of cancer and have lost 100 pounds and kept it off. Steve's cholesterol also dropped from almost 300 to less than 150. We're both healthier and happier than we've ever been before. There's so much good news in this book, a chapter on reversing diseases, including autoimmune diseases that so many experience. He writes this of a patient. One 16-year-old girl with severe lupus was waiting for a kidney transplant. Her creatinine level was an extremely high 4.2 milligrams. When she saw me, he writes, she had very little kidney function, 16 years old. But after 9 months on a Nutritarian diet, she made a complete recovery and was able to stop all medications. Incredibly, her kidney function returned to normal. There's a chapter devoted to cancer prevention, another to the role of hormones, and another on the impact of synthetic chemicals and toxins on our health. Fuhrman breaks down his Nutritarian approach into 4 principles, outlining each with copious detail and compelling stories that reflect the results of the recommendations he's making. I like that he's quick to point out this isn't a diet, it's a eating lifestyle people choose because they choose to eat for life and because, as he writes, the benefits are profound. As he points out also, this isn't an eating lifestyle that focuses on restrictions. I like that. Or what must be subtracted from our diets, but rather on what we can add to benefit our health and well-being. Speaking of what we can add, Dr. Fuhrman devotes over 100 pages to a section called How to Eat, Cook, and Live, which outlines menus and recipes, giving his readers the tools we need to succeed as we learn to eat for life. Fuhrman also addresses some current trends in dieting. I think this is worth noting. He says that low-carb, ketogenic, and paleo diets are very popular and may have some effectiveness for weight control, but they fail miserably, he writes, in terms of long-term cardiovascular risk. We give studies the most credence when they meet 3 criteria. First, they examine many thousands of people. Second, they go on for many years, even decades. And third, They look at hard endpoints, such as heart attack or cardiovascular health. He goes on, high credence studies, some of which are noted in the book, have established that diets such as paleo, Atkins, and ketogenic, which restrict carbs and include much more fats and are therefore low in fiber and phytonutrients, are proven formulas for a shortened lifespan. Plus, no long-lived populations, and he mentions this, such as those in the blue zones, which we discussed in December, ever ate a diet that even remotely resembles these high-protein approaches. Good to know. Dr. Fuhrman addresses a topic called toxic hunger, helping us understand how our body's true hunger and need for nutrients, while also discussing the role emotions play in our food choices. He leads a retreat, and in writing about some of the participants, he writes this: the transformation is exciting, and it's not just about taste. We see an improvement in overall clarity of thought and enthusiasm about life. And by the time our guests go home, they not only love eating a nutritarian diet, they love how it makes them feel. With training in mind, body, spirit eating, I can tell you this discussion of the role of emotions is necessary when it comes to effectively shifting not only our eating habits, but also our lifestyle habits that offers guidance in a framework of grace. Grace is my word, not his. I believe you and I are discovering book by book that a whole food, plant-based eating lifestyle, nutrient dense, offers a healing step forward into our new year, especially on the heels of a year that has found us surrounded by disease and death and isolation from those we love. I hope this year also finds us with a renewed commitment to do all that we can to boost our immunity, extend our lives, reverse our chronic conditions, and prevent the diseases that threaten our ability to live long and well, being well, and serving well. Eating is something we do every day, several times a day, and when we pick up our spoon or our fork, our health truly is in our own hands. 2020 was a call to health. What we do now, today, in 2021, will be our answer. Let's answer by choosing to eat for life. I can think of no better reason. I hope you agree. I hope you'll stop by Story and Song Bookstore Bistro if you're on the island, or visit the online bookstore and order Eat for Life by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. I also hope that you'll follow Be Well, Serve Well on Facebook. And remember, for those of you who are new, Be Well, Serve Well. It's be with 2 E's, because in Hebrew, my name Deborah means worker bee. You can also peruse the website for bewellservewell.com. And I hope you'll join us later this month as we continue seeking to be well read. And I want to thank Connor, as always, for connecting us and making the tech magic that brings me to you wherever you are as you listen. Thanks to each of you for tuning in. I'll look forward to seeing you next month. Until then, be well, serve well, and you know I will do the same. Thank you.